As tactical RPG adventures go, Disciples Liberation is a fun outing in a fantasy world that puts you in the shoes of a classic RPG protagonist with special powers, a motley crew of companions, and a bone to pick with fate. And then it just keeps escalating the stakes further than you'd ever expect them to go. In fact, it punches above its weight class in the quality of its combat and its content, but lets itself down with a disorganized mess of extra systems and some very prominent bugs. Blending a turn-based tactics game with a proper RPG, Disciples Liberation has you wander through isometric environments as you play through a hefty 80-hour RPG story. It can be more than that, though. This playthrough ended up at 92 hours after some side quests. It's a suitably sprawling cosmic story for Nevendar, a fantasy world that's dark and terrible, but still allows for goodness and redemption. Your character, a Gutterborn mercenary named Aviana, has plenty of good, evil, and snarky dialogue choices. To its credit, the side quests have enough diversity and compelling characters that it's not always easy to decide who to side with.
If there is any warmth left in that heart of yours, listen to it and act on it.
There's a lot of branching dialogue, and most of it is pretty good. That said, some of it's really cheesy and accompanied by equally cheesy voice acting. That's honestly a positive thing, because Disciples knows what tone it's going for and sticks to it. Nevendar is a comfort food setting. This is familiar, feel-good generic fantasy done right. When you settle in for a fight, you'll control Aviana, a few of her named companions, and a set of generic units you've recruited on your travels or produced. There's a lot of variety to the units, from armored infantry to bone golems, possessed berserkers, and feral elf snipers. There are over 50 all told, and they'll level up as you go, so nothing ever becomes truly irrelevant. The big letdown here is that even though your companions are a diverse and weird lot, on the battlefield, they're just reskins of basic units with buffed up stats. The combat maps are an ideal size, giving you enough room to maneuver and a sprinkling of terrain to play around in. They avoid the trap of feeling like a tight chessboard, and also the classic genre mistake of attempting environmental realism at the cost of being tactically interesting. No playstyle feels penalized, nor does any style feel fundamentally overpowered. Both melee-centric and ranged options have their high points, and while mobility is strong, there's an interesting counterbalance in that units get bonuses and healing if they choose not to use an action point. Those small bonuses for not acting are brilliant design, allowing defensive strategies to flourish in a genre normally obsessed with aggressive movement. The enemy AI does its best and does focus fire pretty well, but is very bad at knowing when to time its special abilities and truly terrible at staying put to capitalize on those bonuses. So, they're good punching bags, and you get to build some pretty cool armies. Meanwhile, Aviana, who you can build into a teleporting battle magician, would wreak havoc with controlling spells in the enemy's back line. The spells are a particular joy, with an extensive spellbook of magic to collect that varies from situational buffs and fireballs to weird utility spells like walls or clouds of mist. It really nails the feel of that classic fantasy magic user with a spell for every situation, even if you're playing as one of Aviana's melee builds.
I'm going to have fun with you. You suddenly look delicious.
One of the big problems, though, is that there are so many other systems that seem to be designed almost at random. Resources for building your base and upgrading your troops are poorly balanced, with some critical and others all but useless. You can easily have a stockpile of over 200,000 wood and iron at the end of the campaign, but constantly run out of gold. Annoyingly, those resources accumulate in real time, but can only be picked up in your base. So, if you really wanted unlimited resources, you could just leave it running and visit every hour or so to scoop them up. There's other stuff that generally feels irrelevant and only comes up as a frustration, like persistent damage between unrelated combats or the arbitrary limitation on how many buildings you can place in your settlement. None of that really detracts from the otherwise nice story and combat, which can carry you through all those hours. What did get in the way were two things. One, the interface, which slows everything down with submenu upon submenu and loves to use 3 clicks for a task when one would do. The other thing is the bugs, which are both frustrating and too numerous to list in their entirety. Some were annoying but survivable, like low-level combats that can't be auto-resolved, or skills that seem to do nothing. Other issues consistently cropped up that required the reload of a recent quick save or a quit out and restart. None of these were apocalyptic bugs that destroyed a game file, but still, they were bad enough that you'll want to see that they're fixed before you commit to a playthrough. Disciples' Liberation struggles against itself. A rich world and high-stakes story are coupled with fun and varied tactical combat, but this is a game that feels destined for cult status, at least for now, and especially among those who didn't know they wanted this particular blend of tactics and RPG. It's one that feels like it could be the start of something bigger. If bugs can be smoothed out and systems rebalanced a bit, there are a lot of interesting ideas going on here that could be refined into something truly great in a sequel. For more, check out our reviews of Diablo 2 Resurrected and Tales of Arise. And for everything else, stick with IGN.